Imagine pulling up to a gas station, swiping your credit card right at the pump, and then, 6 times out of 10, something breaks, forcing you to go inside the store for help anyway. That level of friction would bankrupt most businesses. But in 2012, that was the reality for Expedia. Out of every 100 people who booked travel on their site, 58 of them ended up calling customer support shortly afterward, just to ask for a copy of their itinerary. This diagram shows what that failure looks like at scale. Over 20 million incoming calls flooded into the company in a single year, creating a $100 million operating cost just to resend automated emails. The strange part is that Expedia executives were aware of the calls, but the company was organized so that every department was succeeding at its specific narrow job. The product team maximized bookings by asking for emails only once, and the support team answered the resulting calls efficiently. Nobody was assigned the job of ensuring customers didn't need to call in the first place. We celebrate the firefighter pulling people from a burning building, but we completely ignore the engineers who write the fire codes. As a society, we are addicted to the downstream rescue, fixing problems after they happen rather than preventing them upstream. The first major barrier to preventing a crisis is what we call problem blindness. This happens when we look at a negative outcome and interpret it as natural, inevitable, and entirely out of our control. In 1998, the Chicago public school system was perfectly calibrated to fail half of its student body. A teenager entering a high school there had roughly a coin flip's chance of graduating, a dismal 52.4% success rate. For years, administrators looked at this dropout rate and shrugged. They pointed to poverty, difficult home lives, and shifting demographics. The system simply accepted failing grades as a tragic but unavoidable condition of urban education. This flowchart maps the discovery that finally broke that assumption. Researchers at the University of Chicago found that if a 9th grader simply earns 5 full-year credits and avoids failing more than one core class, their statistical probability of graduating multiplies by 3.5. Income, race, and even prior test scores barely mattered in comparison. Armed with that specific target, the district completely shifted its tactics. Principals assigned their best teachers to 9th grade instead of 12th. They tracked student attendance and grades in real time. Over the next 2 decades, the graduation rate skyrocketed 25 points. Tens of thousands of students earned diplomas because a few leaders stopped accepting a 50% failure rate as a law of nature. You cannot solve a massive problem if you are blind to the fact that it is a problem. Even if you can see a problem, the second barrier often stops intervention dead in its tracks: a lack of ownership. This is when the people most capable of fixing an issue refuse to act, assuming it simply isn't their place to get involved. In the 1970s, it was entirely normal for young children to bounce around the back seats of moving cars without any restraints. The resulting injuries and fatalities were epidemic, effectively making the automobile the #1 killer of children. Pediatricians were treating the resulting trauma in emergency rooms across the country. Their training strictly focused on diagnosing and treating illness in a clinical setting, not lobbying for public safety. But in 1975, a medical journal article challenged these doctors to step completely outside their traditional roles and advocate for restraints. Doctors like Bob Sanders in Tennessee turned their dining rooms into war rooms. They relentlessly called lawmakers on weekends, fighting back against critics who argued that child seats infringed on parental rights. By 1985, their persistent lobbying had pushed all 50 states to pass child restraint laws. Systemic problems are eradicated only when someone voluntarily claims responsibility for a crisis they did not personally create. The final barrier keeps us perpetually trapped in the present. It's called tunneling. When you are suffocated by a scarcity of time or resources, your brain abandons long-term planning. You just deal with whatever emergency is right in front of you. Consider a study of hospital nurses. Researchers followed them and watched as they continually solved unexpected, urgent problems. In one instance, a newborn was ready to be discharged, but the infant's anti-abduction security tag had fallen off. The nurse scrambled, searched the bassinet, found the expensive tag, and safely discharged the mother with barely a delay. A few hours later, it happened to another baby, and the nurses rushed to solve it again. Because these workers were tunneling from one immediate patient crisis to the next, no one ever paused to ask why the tags kept falling off in the first place. Tunneling creates an environment that actively praises short-term daily heroics, but a system built entirely on rescues never learns, never improves, and virtually guarantees that the exact same emergencies will happen tomorrow. Escaping this reactive loop requires two things: carving out organizational time to think, and artificially manufacturing urgency for a threat that hasn't actually struck yet. This satellite data shows the scale of the 1970s ozone layer crisis. Chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, were slowly eating away our planet's primary shield against ultraviolet radiation. It was a catastrophic threat, but because it was invisible, the public felt zero urgency to fix it. Scientists like Mario Molina realized that publishing academic papers simply wasn't enough. Breaking past problem blindness meant stepping out of their academic silos and taking ownership of the public narrative. To manufacture that missing urgency, these advocates linked atmospheric destruction directly to mundane, everyday consumer choices. They painted a clear line connecting the threat of skin cancer to the aerosol hairsprays sitting on millions of bathroom counters. The strategy worked. The ozone threat became an immediate household issue. The resulting political pressure forced a global consensus, enlisting unlikely champions to pass sweeping international treaties banning the chemicals entirely. That is the ultimate paradox of upstream thinking. The greatest victory is always a non-event. It is the car crash that didn't happen, the teenager who didn't drop out of high school, and the global catastrophe that never arrived. The question is, what recurring fires in your own life do you need to stop fighting and start preventing?